It's wonderful to see you all here. I'm Helen Reese. I'm a member of the Standing Committee, and by now you probably have realized that I am not Peter Banos, who is in your order of service, who often welcomes us on Sunday mornings. We're glad you're here with us online or here in our beautiful sanctuary. A special warm welcome to visitors. We welcome you wherever you are on your journey of faith, and we look forward to getting to know you better. To learn more about First Church Boston or Unitarian Universalism, please visit firstchurchboston.org or contact Reverend Stephanie or myself during coffee hour, which will follow the service. Today we have a few other announcements. Following this service, Reverend Stephanie will begin a two-part class called UU Basics and Beyond this afternoon at 12:30 right here in the auditorium, with a second session next week. Whether you're new to First Church or a longtime member, you're welcome to join this opportunity to learn and reflect together on what it means to be Unitarian Universalist and to learn more about how to be and what membership here at this First Church means. This class is particularly recommended for those interested in joining the church in April and is supported by the nominating committee. At this time, I'd like to invite Bob Winkley, who would like to say a few words of invitation about his concert this afternoon.
Good morning. I wanted to be sure and invite all of you to join us this afternoon at 3 o'clock here in the sanctuary for a concert we're calling the Poulenc Project. Francis Poulenc was an early 20th century French composer who wrote a great deal of music, both sacred and secular. This morning you heard one of his more sacred songs, Priez pour paix, or Pray for Peace. We'll be featuring Aaron Anderson, Heather Gallagher, Alex Lyons, and Bill Thorpe in a number of songs, as well as opening it with a little piano solo by me. So I hope you'll all join us. Again, it's at 3 o'clock here in the sanctuary, and thank you for thinking about it.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you again for being here today, and let our service now begin.
How did you arrive here today? Skipping up the stairs of the amphitheater, rolling up the ramp from the street to the main doors, or maybe sneaking in the park house next door and coming through the hidden door behind here or behind the choir. Or maybe you're online on your smartphone in your kitchen or even still lying in bed. However we arrived, may we find strength and renewal in being here together, diverse and connected, all seeking something we need, each desiring something different. Whatever brings you here to this time and space, however you arrive in the fullness of who you are, may this hour of worship, of community, of making meaning together help us all to flourish in our inherent dignity and worthiness. So may it be. I invite you to rise in body or in spirit as we light our chalice, symbol of Unitarian Universalism, and say together the First Church Boston affirmation printed in your order of service. Love is the spirit of this church, and service its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. And please take a moment now to greet one another and throw a wave up there to the camera for those online. invite you to remain standing as you, in spirit or in body, as we sing together our opening hymn, Where is Our Holy Church, 113. Our theme for the month and for today is this theme of equity, and you'll hear some of that reflected in these lyrics.
The first thing I want to say is well done for all of you being here on Daylight Savings Sunday. And if people come in at noon, smile respectfully at them. Once upon a time, when the geese drank wine and the monkeys chewed tobacco up a tree, there was a prince who was traveling the land with his armies, fighting dragons and saving damsels and conquering new lands. And while coming through a forest and a place he'd never been to before, they came to a clearing, and in that clearing, on top of a little hill, was the most beautiful castle he'd ever seen. So he decides to ride up to that castle, and as he's riding up, he sees a face. Just for a moment, a face appears in a window, and it is the most beautiful face of a person that he's ever seen before. And he instantly falls in love with this person. And he goes up and he knocks on the castle's door. And the voice, "Who is it?" He said, "It is I, Prince Rupert. I have a mighty army. I've conquered many lands. I've saved the innocent. Would you please come out and join me? Or could I come in and meet you?" And the voice on the other side of the door says, "There is only room for one here." So dejected, he returns to his army and he travels on, but he is still thinking about that beautiful face on that beautiful castle. And he meets a wise woman, and she said, "Well, an army's it might be a bit much." He went, "Right." So a few months later, he returns to that same castle, goes up by himself, knocks on the door. "Who is it?" "It is I, Prince Rupert. Once again, I am here. I would love to come and meet you face to face. And the voice says, there's only room for one here. He goes away dejected. Oh, sure, he's fighting battles and doing good deeds, but his heart's not in it. And then he meets a wizard, and he tells the wizard what's been going on. And the wizard said, maybe you need to take off that armor. Maybe you just need to go up in your regular clothes. And so once again, he heads up. Same thing happens. Knocks on the door. Who is it? Rupert. Can I come in? There's only room for one here. He leaves. And he spends years wandering the countryside, thinking about that castle and the beautiful face, the beautiful person who lives there. And finally, after many years, he goes back up to that castle door, and he knocks on the door one more time. And from the inside of the door, who is it? And Rupert's answer is, it is thou. In the notes for that story that I was looking at, they said, remind your audience that this is perhaps a metaphor about how we need to be when we want to meet God. This might be that we need to think more about our true identities than the external, the identity that we show to the world. But as a Unitarian Universalist, the thought of God living in a castle that is far off and shiny and they are beautiful doesn't always work. I like the idea of that it's not just about us changing ourselves to meet God, but perhaps that God is changed when God meets us. That there is some interaction there. And if I could stretch this metaphor one more step. For centuries, our churches, other people's churches and religious communities have worked where we attract people who come to visit our beautiful buildings. And we hope that after time they come and they join with us and that they transfer themselves so they start being more like us. They start listening to the same radio programs and start reading the same newspapers and maybe even start going to the same schools. We hope that people will join with us and become more like us, and perhaps we will change a little bit. It's a covenanted relationship. But it's a different time. And maybe the same way we hope that God is not just alone in a castle and will come out into the world, that maybe it is time for us too to think about how we can be one with the world, not so much that we become worldly and leave this behind, but that there is the gifts that we have here that we can bring out into the world and think about what we can do to change the world and change ourselves. It is now time for our wonderful choir.
Understanding heaven
I invite you to take a deep breath in and out, and another in and out. Teetering on the cusp of spring, the world not yet green, the branches still bare of buds and bloom. We pause and we wait. We wait for all the flourishing of life not yet seen. We wait for all the promises of peace not yet made real. And we wait for the dreams of equity and justice not yet enacted in law. And still, we are tired of the waiting, of bearing witness to suffering, to violence, to hunger and cold. We are tired of feeling helpless across the oceans of water and the seas of mistrust. We are tired of being tired in a world of wars waged with bombs and with words. We pray that with the rising of spring, our hope may be renewed. We pray that our waiting may become actions, however small, where we are the channels for love, for kindness, for equity, for a more welcoming church, city, nation, and world. And we pray that we may change and that we may cultivate spaces that make room there for all of us, for the every one of us, to flourish in the fullness of our dignity, our possibility, our worthiness. And resting now in a moment of stillness, may we connect with the rising spring, drawing hope from life seeking life, season after season, once again. Last night, we had a potluck that I know many of you were there for. And it was the first potluck I have seen since I've been here. And what I loved about it most was how very many people helped with the dishes. And I say that because it's just a reminder that to come together in community, we do need each other. And sometimes it's to do the not fun stuff, like the dishes after a potluck. And I just want to thank you for the kindness and the generosity you bring to this place and to one another. And as this offertory is given, as you are able to give financially or not, thank you for participating in this ritual of gratitude and of giving in so very many ways. Oh, yes, we are doing the stones. We are going to do the stones, thank you. This is what happens when we only do this once a month. I get in my role and I think I know what I'm doing, and I love my opportunities to show you my humility and my humanity. So yes, we have an opportunity once a month where part of how we share and support one another is through a moment of sharing our joys and concerns. And whether you come forward to share something, saying your name and adding a rock if you wish to the water, or whether you're here just to witness, thank you for being part of this ritual. So I invite you now to come forward, and then we'll have a ritual of gratitude.
I have lots to be grateful for, and much of it is centered around my friends who supported me this week. I went off to do an audition for orchestral conducting, so it was really exciting. I got to conduct an 80-piece orchestra, and they were fabulous. It was all young people, so it was a wonderful, ebullient, bright energy, and I find that very feeding to be around young people like these young people over here. So I was grateful for all the support and love that I got on Facebook. It was fun. And I was grateful that it was also my first potluck. I had never been, because I don't think you've had one in 3 or 4 years, right? And I loved the games. I thought they were silly and fun, and our team lost, I think, really bad. But the food was amazing, so thanks to you that prepared it. It was really good. And I just thank you for being the great community that you are and supporting me and supporting our music, and I hope to see you this afternoon. So I'm putting in 3 because I feel really greedy, that big old dark one right there. That's how grateful I am.
Good morning. I'm Helen Reese. I just want to pay a public tribute to my mother, who passed away in January at the wonderful age of nearly 95. She came to this country as a refugee from war-torn Europe with my dad. They were young, they had almost nothing, and it just gives me hope and inspiration when we talk about the wars and the times we're in, that we get through them if we don't give up. And hers was a life of courage, of inspiration, and of sticking to her guns for everything she wanted to make happen. I also want to ask for your thoughts for my younger brother, who was closest to my mom, deeply dependent on her. He has many challenges, and he's having a very rough time with her loss, and I would particularly ask for you to keep him in mind. Thank you. So 2 stones for those.
Hi, I'm Margaret. Today, I'm feeling the balance of the universe in my heart. My mom passed away in November, and I loved her very, very dearly. She was the light of my life. In the next week or so, a new light of my life will be born, my first grandchild. And I'm very grateful to have that balance. Thank you.
My name's Heather, and I want to take a moment to give thanks for my very resilient mother, who's going to turn 97 on March 17th, and who has survived several serious medical issues in the past few months. And we're just very grateful to be able to celebrate her birthday with her. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Pam, and I have two close friends that have been diagnosed with cancer. And it's with sorrow that I see them suffering through surgery and chemo. So I just ask that you keep them and all the people that are suffering with medical conditions in your heart.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Rosemary. The reason I missed the potluck last night was at 6 o'clock, the exact same time, at Park Street Church, there was a vigil for Aaron Bushnell and for the 30,000 plus civilians who have died in Gaza. And it felt important to gather there with those about 100 people who were there. With candles, some real ones and some like this, much easier to manage. There were speakers from across the gamut of our society, and it was great to have that opportunity to acknowledge the sacrifices and to know that there are so many caring people pushing to move beyond war and toward justice. Thank you.
So I have a lot of stuff that is going on. I have my ankle surgery that is coming up on the 29th of March. So very, very soon I will be out for Easter because of that. But I'm anxious, but I'm also excited for that to happen. This is the time for surgeries right now. My dad just had a surgery on one of his knees. He broke both of his knees in his lifetime, and he's been putting off the surgery for a while. But it went well in February, and my mom that has the cancer was going to have surgery. They were preparing for her. They put her down, and they thought that she was having a heart attack. And so they had to stop the operation and stuff. They don't actually think it's a heart attack anymore, but an allergic reaction to something that they gave her to put her down. So I haven't heard back yet from my sister about the next action, about what's gonna change about putting her down so that they can do the surgery. But they obviously had to move the surgery date. So yeah, just keep your thoughts and prayers on my surgery life, I guess.
I have two quick things. One is our dear choir member and my long-term best friend, Brianna Perez, is feeling very ill and will hopefully be going to the doctor later. So fingers crossed that there is an easy solution and that she will be better soon. And I would also like to express my deep and enduring hope for a free Palestine.
Hi everyone, I'm Jay. If you don't recognize me, I'm relatively new to the choir, so as everyone likes to say, I'm just a baby. It's pretty simple what I'm gonna say, but it's my birthday this week. However old you think I'm turning, I can assure you it is younger because everyone thinks I'm 5 years older than I am. I'm turning 19. I never thought, and I never really thought I would make it this far. So Every birthday is a milestone for me, so thank you.
I'm going to add 2 stones. One is for a dear friend of mine who works for the United Nations in New York City. And I hadn't talked to her in months, but I had a suspicion why, and I found out that she is indeed on the desk trying to feed Gaza. And when I said I was thinking about her, she just said, "I'm not on the ground." So I just want to think about all those who are hungry in Gaza and in the whole region that are suffering the fears and the effects of violence that has just spread in Israel and in Gaza and in surrounding countries. And this stone, it's a little stone that is intended to symbolically hold so much, which is all that is within each of your hearts and minds with your own struggles and longings and joys, is held in this water of community. And now we will have our offering and express our gratitude and support for this place and one another.
Good morning. of those daylight saving times. Oh, I almost forgot. This morning's reading is an excerpt from Minnie Bruce Pratt from a book entitled Identity, Skin, Blood, Heart. And this is in 3 feminist perspectives on anti-Semitism and racism. A little bit of background. The author is recounting how, at about age 8, her father wanted to take her to the top of the courthouse for a view of their town. Although she was afraid to go that high, as an adult, she later describes what she would have seen. What I would have seen at the top. On the streets around the courthouse square, the Methodist Church, the limestone building with the county health department, Board of Education, welfare department. My mother worked there. The yellow brick Baptist church, the Gulf Station, the pool hall, no women allowed, Cleveland's grocery, Ward's shoe store. Then all in a line connected, the bank, the post office, Dr. Nicholson's office, one door for whites, one for blacks. Then separate, the Presbyterian Church, the newspaper office, the yellow brick jail, same brick as the Baptist Church and as the courthouse. I was shaped by my relation to those buildings and to the people in those buildings, by ideas of who should be working in the Board of Education, of who should be in the bank handling money, of who should have the guns and the keys to the jail, of who should be in the jail. And I was shaped by what I didn't see or didn't notice on those streets.
On Tuesday, I made my way through the cold, drizzly weather across the common to the old State House, where I joined a tour commemorating the events of the Boston Massacre 254 years ago that day. The small group included a family of 4 from State College, Pennsylvania, a woman from the Hingham Historical Society, and a Benjamin Franklin reenactor in full costume. I envied him his waterproof tri-corner hat as I stood in the light drizzle without one. Our guide, Jim, was deeply knowledgeable and an engaging presenter. We began the tour across the street from the square where the violence broke out. To help us understand the city layout in 1770, Jim held up a copy of Paul Revere's famous etching of the event. In the image, you've probably seen it, a row of red coats fire muskets into the crowd in front of the State House. The steeple of old brick, the stately meeting house of First Church Boston, is clearly visible behind the old State House. Holding the image in one hand, Jim used his other to point away from the State House to the waterfront, blocks away. In the years before the massacre, explained Jim, the stiff resistance of Boston merchants to paying taxes on certain imported goods confounded the British. Concerned with rising tensions, the British governor asked for soldiers. 2,000 soldiers arrived to stay within a city of 16,000. 1 soldier for every 8 residents. Questions of money, identity, and control were playing out within the spaces of a city square. Pointing to different locations across the square, Jim then proceeded to tell us more about the 5 people who lost their lives. The first to die was Crispus Attucks, a mulatto soldier of African and indigenous ancestry. 20 years earlier, he had been enslaved to a Framingham man. We know this because of a 1750 newspaper ad seeking his capture. Having self-emancipated by fleeing to the sea, Attucks became a sailor who reappeared in Boston at the front of the crowd on that fateful day. Last year, Boston Mayor Michelle Wu declared March 5th Crispus Attucks Commemoration Day, stating, "The story that an Afro-Native man sparked the war for independence often goes overlooked. So many portrayed Crispus Attucks as a white man, erasing his Afro-Native heritage, erasing the fact that a formerly enslaved man faced down British muskets for our nation's freedom, and erasing the historical fact that it was the courage of a person of color that stoked the flames of this revolution." After leading us to a sidewalk overlooking Faneuil Hall, Jim continued the story of Crispus Attucks. Faneuil Hall had been built in 1742, a gift to the city by merchant Peter Faneuil. The building included a marketplace on the first floor and a meeting hall on the second. But Attucks, explained Jim, would never have made it to that second floor. As a place of power and political discourse, the second floor was the domain of white men with property, the only ones entitled to vote in 1770. Except that in death, Attucks' body was brought into the second floor hall, first to be examined, and then to lay in state, before being buried in the granary burying ground beside the white victims of that night. Dynamics of race, gender, and nation interplayed with the spaces and places of these violent, politicized events. In her essay, Identity, Skin, Blood, Heart, Minnie Bruce Pratt depicts another town square, recounting the layout of buildings of brick and stone in her childhood hometown. Pratt notes the lessons these buildings taught her. "I was shaped by my relation to those buildings and to the people in the buildings, by ideas of who should be working in the Board of Education, of who should be in the bank handling money, and who should have the guns and keys to the jail, and who should be in the jail. And I was shaped by what I didn't see or didn't notice on those streets." These buildings helped Pratt understand the world. They taught her how to learn where people should and shouldn't be. Far from value-free empty stages, the buildings themselves participated in the ongoing dynamics of how people learned to interact. What did you learn about the way the world is by where you grew up? What lessons did you draw from who was sitting behind the big desks at the bank and who was sweeping the floors? What seemed normal to you because of who stood at the front of the classroom or preached the sermon. Do you remember the first time you encountered a different way of living? Perhaps you grew up in a rural area of open yards with single-family homes and were startled the first time you saw an apartment tower in a city and thought, who could live there? Or maybe you grew up in an urban area in which you commonly cross paths with unhoused people, street carts with all kinds of food, and the familiar sound of buskers making music in the subway, only to then be unsettled by the eerie quiet of your first overnight in a suburb or a camping trip in the mountains. Our ideas of how the world works, of what is normal or different, fair or wrong, is often taught not only by words, but also by moving through various spaces and places. The simple repetition of seeing the same kinds of buildings, layouts, and people instills in us a sense of the way it is. In her classic 1929 text, A Room of One's Own, Virginia Woolf questions the way it is for women, particularly for women seeking to write fiction. She begins her book by recounting an experience of, quote, audacious trespassing, in which she, a woman, dared to leave the gravel path of a vaunted British college to walk across the grass. A scholar quickly intercepted her, and Woolf returned to the path. As she writes, this was the turf, there was the path. Only the fellows and scholars are allowed here. The gravel is the place for me. Continuing on her way, she meandered to a nearby library, only to be barred by a scholar who, quote, regretted in a low voice as he waved me back that ladies are only admitted to the library if accompanied by a fellow of the college or furnished with a letter of introduction. Such experiences launch Woolf into an extended reflection on the material situations that enable or prevent the very work of writing. Not only have women long been barred from such spaces of learning, she argues, they have also been kept from the spaces and vocations of acquiring wealth that might support their own learning and the creation of spaces for other women to learn, to think, to write. So having been asked to give a lecture on women and literature, Woolf responds with a series of essays on the material and economic needs of women, challenging the way it is and calling not simply for a room of one's own, but for a world in which a woman would have the opportunities to earn enough money and have enough time to herself to own and enjoy such a room. Power and dignity are not just intellectual concepts. They are physical, material realities of how and where we are able to work, live, shop, and play. As Unitarian Universalists, we value equity and justice. We talk a lot about building diverse, inclusive communities. But sometimes I wonder just how to build such communities, not only with our ideals, but also quite literally with our spaces, our building, and our city. For example, our neighborhood of Back Bay is a beautiful historic place with townhouses, brick sidewalks, massive trees, and so very many stairs. Walking along the sidewalks, it is clear that entering most buildings requires climbing stairs. Indeed, the front entrance of the adjacent townhouse that houses our offices has 11 stairs. And while you can enter that building by walking from this stage area directly into the main office, if you notice you cannot get to where I am standing without climbing 3 stairs. Fortunately, where you are seated is fully accessible, as is the auditorium and the chapel and the restrooms. So hopefully the staff and I will remain in good health to maneuver stairs, especially our music director, Gigi, who has the joy of climbing stairs between this floor to direct the choir and the second floor to play the organ, sometimes multiple times in a service. I use this example of material limits because it is quite literally right here in front of us. But it is not by far the only example of the way buildings and spaces reflect assumptions about who will and will not be part of a given place. What assumptions are part of the spaces you normally inhabit? How do the buildings and neighborhoods you move through each day teach you about what is normal for where people are or are not? In the not too distant past, it was not uncommon to argue over the rightful place of women or people of color or even Catholics. Such rhetoric of the right place was often backed up quite literally by signs declaring whites only or colored. And sometimes membership policies defining qualifications of certain gender, race, or religion more quietly but no less effectively policed who was and was not allowed into a certain place, such as Wolf opening the library door. And sometimes straight-up violence has also sent the message. Peaceful protesters trying to cross a bridge in Selma are viciously beaten. Riots break out on the streets of Boston trying to stop buses of children crossing to another part of town. Keeping people in an expected place to retain how it is has a long history. Sometimes overt violence, policies, or signs convey who is or is not welcome are not even needed. Our cultural assumptions, internalized through all those experiences, words, and ideas, shape our sense of place and people. Were there signs posted telling Crispus Attucks he was not welcome on the second floor of Faneuil Hall? Was there a guard there barring his way? Or was it just known who was and wasn't welcome? Had he and other people of color just learned through experience by watching the many ways white men with property could move freely and they could not? So also, how did the white women of 1770 know what was and was not their place to venture, of where they could and could not expect access? Had they, like Minnie Bruce Pratt, simply learned from girlhood which people were merchants, politicians, preachers, and soldiers, and which were not? Spaces and places are not value-free backgrounds, empty stages to the dynamics of social power and inequity. Rather, how we build spaces sends messages about what we value and who we expect to be there. This is not a small thing to me. Examining the ways spaces and places teach us values and social dynamics is the core framework on my doctoral dissertation of our experiences of home and homeland. But even more importantly, I wrote that dissertation because of my own experiences as a woman and as a single mom that left me feeling excluded and frustrated in a world so often built for men and married two-parent families. In navigating work, school, church, and a social life, I would too often feel like something was wrong with me, that I needed to change something about me, pretend to be something different than I was, to be accepted. Maybe you felt that way too. Such experiences made me mad. But they also awakened me to how social systems, built spaces, and cultural assumptions can generate inequity and exclusion. Each month this year, we have been exploring one of the shared values proposed as part of a revised Article 2 of the UU Association bylaws, a document that names what UU congregations in North America agree on, well, most of the time. This month, we focus on the value of equity. The value of equity, says the proposal, declares that every person has the right to flourish with inherent dignity and worthiness. Hear that again. Every person has the right to flourish with inherent dignity and worthiness. In response, the proposal continues, we covenant to use our time, wisdom, attention, and money to build and sustain fully accessible and inclusive communities. Whether or not this language becomes part of the UUA bylaws, the value of equity is one I hope we will promote here at First Church Boston. How might we sustain a community and a place in which we all feel welcome? How might we move beyond assumptions of the way it is to notice how we inadvertently send messages of who is and is not expected to be here on this stage, in the community, or in the office building? Sometimes we need to climb to the top of the tower, as Bruce Pratt imaginatively did, to look around and get a new perspective on the world we thought we knew. Awaken to new understandings. Maybe then we can help to recreate our communities to be more inclusive, more equitable, and more life-giving, so that we may all flourish. So may it be. Amen. And our closing hymn is 1023, Building Bridges, and it's around, so I'm hoping Gigi's got a plan.
I can make up a plan. Who loves number 4? I love number 4. Who loves number 4? Come on, be brave. Don't make me come back. Number 4. Pick number 3. Anyone want to do number 3? Oh, good, you're getting braver. Number 2. Number 1, we have everybody else's number 1. This is going to be number 1 heavy. All right, the choir's going to help you, but honestly, feel free to sing whenever you like. It's really pretty no matter what. So we're going to sing it all through together once, just in unison, no fancy harmony, and then we can break it up and I'll let you know when to. Here we go. It's a very pretty tune. I'll
With that image of bridges across our divisions, hear this benediction. As part of one interconnected world, may we love with abundance, welcome across difference, and work together to support a just, equitable, and sustainable life for all. Amen. I clearly don't do well on daylight savings days. We work together as a community. That's why we're all still standing. Let's extinguish the chalice, shall we? Okay, now you know I don't have it memorized. Somebody start me off. We extinguish this chalice, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, and the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Be well.